What is up, my Lorcana Goons, and welcome back to the Lorcana Goons channel. My name is Kevin, and in this video we're going to go over what I believe are going to be the most impactful cards that are coming out in Azurite Sea, which is set 6 of the Disney Lorcana TCG. We're on a journey into the Azurite Sea, and there's already some key cards that are standing out to me in my testing as I begin my road to Continentals, because if you didn't know, I actually made top 16 at the DLC in Atlanta, and I was able to earn my invite, so I'm going to be able to participate as a competitor in the Disney Lorcana Continental Tournament, which takes place at Disneyland in January. And this is the format that I'm going to be playing. I'm going to have to play Azurite Sea format. So these are cards that I'm already thinking about, cards that I've already been testing, proxying on Tabletop Simulator, on Ink Table, with my friends and stuff like that. We with some proxies. So if you like this channel and you want to follow my journey to the Continental Tournament, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you're a Lorcana Goon, because it does support the channel. And there's a couple other ways to support the channel, like going to pristineprotectiontcg.com, buying sleeves from them, and using code GOONS10 to save 10% off your order. These are the sleeves that I use when I play tournaments. I use them at every DLC, and I've got 2 DLC tops with them. So I feel like I have some pretty good luck with them. Most of the time, if I lose, it's my fault. Anyways, let's talk about this Sapphire new ramp card that's coming out. Sail the Azurite Sea. This turn, you may put an additional card from your hand into the ink bowl face down. Draw a card. Now, yes, that card does have to be inkable, so it's more of a Bell type effect, reminiscent of Bell Strange but Special, where you can ink twice that turn. Unlike Tipo, you can ink an uninkable card, but if you are using this ability and you're not worried about that, then you can just ink twice per turn, and you get to draw a card along with it. So it adds that extra bit of cycle that Sapphire needs sometimes. I feel like Nothing to Hide was a very good card because it let you draw. So are cards like Develop Your Brain, and Sail the Azurite Sea kind of does that for you. It's a 2-cost card. It's inkable as well, so it works very well with Sapphire decks. And if you ask any Sapphire player, would you like more ramp cards in this coming set, they're probably always going to say yes. So knowing Sapphire, that is the strategy. This is a very unique one, and definitely one that you should not sleep on. Another crazy Sapphire card that I think we should not disrespect is Prepare Your Bot. This is a 1-cost inkable action that says ready chosen item, ready chosen robot character. They can't quest for the rest of the turn. You have to choose one of those. So ready and chosen item really is the ability that stands out to me and most players. It's really because you can use dime twice, right? Now, I know that seems kind of far-fetched to like some players, but honestly, red blue is that deck. Like Ruby Sapphire is that hyper control deck. You can literally play 70 plus cards like Hamza Khan and do really well with Ruby Sapphire. And if you're shoving in copies of Prepare Your Bot so that you can use dime twice, that just sounds broken. You know what I mean? Like the deck already feels like a Tamatoa OTK deck. Like half the time they're just controlling the board and gaining little bits of lore, and they drop Tamatoa dime and they gain 10 lore in 1 turn. And if they have 2 Tamatoa and you have no way to stop the one in their hand, you lose anyway. And I feel like Prepare Your Bot kind of replaces that second Tamatoa, because if you have enough ink, you can literally play set up dime and then go Tamatoa for 8. Dime for 2, I gained 7 lore. Prepare Your Bot, ready dime. That's only 9. That's 10 lore that they've used. And Sapphire at 10 lore, 12 lore is what it takes to use dime twice. That is not hard for Sapphire to do. So definitely a card that I want to explore. And by the way, we kind of did a video like this last week with Wonderland, which is really cool. We went through some cards that would come out from Azurite Sea in the podcast episode of Quest with the Guest, but really not all the cards have come out yet. So there's some extra cards that I really want to go over. And I've been testing already a bunch of different decks, just like on like Ink Table, like I said, just like very small bits of testing. Eventually, maybe next week, I'm gonna just put up 10 different deck lists that you probably can try. Right now, I'm just talking about cards that have stood out to me so far, and I feel like after I really test these cards and deck lists, then I'll be able to provide you guys a much more crafted deck list idea. So stay tuned for those videos. But let's talk about Moana, the self-taught sailor. This is a 1-cost character that's inkable, 3 strength, 2 willpower. This character can't challenge unless you have a captain character in play. However, you can quest with her, which is really powerful because you can just keep gaining that increment of lore every turn until your opponent either has an out to it or decides to trade one of their characters into it. Most characters up until turn 4 will just die to 3 strength. You know what I mean? And it gets a very good trade value. And if you're playing captains in your deck, along with some other new cards that are coming out with this set, like the new Daisy Duck or even the new John Silvershift characters, or the new Smee, this card has a lot of capabilities in the format. Even without captains in your deck, I still think this is a pretty good one-cost character you can play. It's just an overstated card. Overstated meaning for 1 ink, you're playing a character that has 3 strength, which is not something that you really should be allowed to do until turn 2, unless you're playing an uninkable card, or something like Felicia that has reckless, but even Felicia has 1 willpower, Moana has 2 willpower, so very strong card, definitely something you might want to consider just playing in any Ruby deck. It'll get you a lot of lore and net you some value, but it does have some drawbacks because it will lose to Storm Rage on, Fire the Cannons, and other cards like that. Another great early game card that you want to look into is Lilo Escape Artist. Oh my gosh, this card is so good. For my Yu-Gi-Oh fans out there, this is Treeborn Lilo out here. Lilo the Escape Artist, 2 cost inkable, 1 strength, 2 willpower, quest for 2. At the start of your turn, if this card is in your discard, you may play her and she enters play exerted. And yes, you have to pay the ink to use that ability. So if you have 6 ink, before you even draw the card for your turn, you have to use the Lilo ability. So if you have 6 ink and you want to play 2 Lilos from your discard pile that turn, you would have to ready your ink, set. This is where the triggers happen because it's ready, set, draw. You then pay the 2 ink per Lilo, so you play 2, you pay 4 ink, and then you draw for your turn. So be sure to understand that ruling and how those phases work. Ready, set, draw. Really cool ability because this plays around Be Prepared in its own merit. You could just slap Lilos on the board, and if your opponent has Be Prepared, it doesn't matter because you just played them again from your discard. It's so cool. This card is actually really good. However, it does lose out to green cards that will bounce it back to your hand. Sapphire cards like Let It Go and Hades will put it into the inkwell, but there's some cool strategies to be able to put this into your discard pile, and we'll go over that too. Like Twin Fire, this card is a 2-cost uninkable that says deal 2 damage to chosen character. Then you may choose and discard a card to deal 2 damage to another chosen character. Pretty cool effect. Like I said, you can use this and discard your Lilos and put them in the discard pile. So now in the future, when you run out of steam in your Amber decks, or you don't necessarily want to commit to a big Be Prepared board, maybe you want to use the Lilo that you discarded earlier in the grave, right? You can deal 2 damage to a Lilo and a Piglet in the same turn. Maybe even against Emerald Steel decks, you can deal 2 damage to 2 different Diablos, which might be on the field. I think giving any extra removal to Steel in this way is pretty good, and you don't even have to discard and deal the 2 damage if you don't want to. If you ever just want a Fire the Cannons type card in your deck, or a Baboom, for example, this card also becomes that, because you don't have to discard if you don't want to. Next up, I want to go over Thievery. This is a 1-cost action card that says chosen opponent loses 1 lore, gain 1 lore. Now, at first, this may sound underwhelming, but let me tell you right now, this is a good card. This is going to be a meta impacting card. Just look at a card like Pirate's Life. Pirate's Life is a 6-cost. It's inkable, and it's a song, but it does this effect twice. You gain 2 lore, and your opponent loses 2 lore. Thievery cost 1. It cost 1/6 of Pirate's Life, and it has half of the effect. That's pretty good in my opinion. That's kind of overstated, and if you've ever felt like, dang, I lost by 18. I lost when I was at 18, 19, and you just couldn't get there. You just couldn't get over that last inch of lore, that 1 lore. Maybe Thievery is a card you might want to look into. This card is very good for the new Ruby Amethyst burn decks that have been trending lately, ever since the luxury team accomplished a top 8 feat with the red-purple burn deck. And I think that deck only gets better this format because of this card. We got to talk about Basil. This is one of the enchanted cards. It's an emerald inkable 6-cost card. He's shiftable, which means he's a Floodborn, 4 cost, 4 strength, 5 willpower, and says during your turn, whenever a card is put into your inkwell, you may pay 1 extra ink to have chosen opponent choose and discard a card. And he quests for 2. So right off the bat, you can utilize this as an extra discard outlet in your Emerald decks. I do think that a lot of people immediately think about how you can abuse this in Sapphire decks, which sounds pretty good if you're playing cards like Fishbone Quill. However, you're going to have to play into the late game if you're using a Emerald Sapphire strategy, which, don't get me wrong, it definitely sounds very powerful, but that's something that you got to get to cooking because it's definitely a wide open format. Card's good, but after my own testing, I think that this is probably going to land more in the Emerald Steel decks as an extra morph target that you can shift upon, and starting from turn 5 and on, every time you ink, you'll be able to discard an extra card from the opponent's hand. You don't have to abuse it and do it multiple times per turn, which you can, by the way. It's very good with Sapphire. But even in just Emerald decks like Emerald Steel or maybe something like Emerald Amethyst, doing it once per turn might just be the way. We need to go over Sugar Rush Speedway Finish Line. This is a 2-cost uninkable Amber location that says when you move a character here from a location, you may banish this location to gain 3 lore lore and draw 3 cards. It's an amber location. It's uninkable. It's only 2 costs though. It does have a 6 move cost and a 7 willpower, but when you use this with the ruby cards, there's so many ways to be able to move your characters here for free from another location to trigger this and not only draw 3 cards, but just burst lore out of nowhere. If you've been playing the ruby amber location deck that plays Jim Hawkins, then this is going to be a really good fit for your deck. You can use Jim Hawkins to bring this out, but it won't trigger the ability of Sugar Rush because it has to be from a location to this location. So I found that the best combo is you play the 1 cost ruby Sugar Rush on turn 1. That way you can set up characters later on in the game to move to that location, to this location, because you can move to the ruby location for free anyways. And realistically, if you have a character like Tuk Tuk or Jim Hawkins, you can move Jim Hawkins from that location to this one anyway. And what's really cool about Jim Hawkins is if he's already at a location, the moment you play Sugar Rush Speedway, you can trigger the Jim Hawkins ability to move it there for free, and then you'll trigger the ability of Speedway immediately by just paying 2 ink. So Jim Hawkins is really good in a deck like this if he's already at a location, because this is a great top deck in that situation. And then Sugar Rush Speedway, the ruby Sugar Rush, has the ability that lets you basically move to any location for free so long as the character is dry and you can exert them and deal 1 damage to them. So that alone is already a great way to move it to this card. So a lot of draw power. Drawing 3 cards is something that we should not underestimate. White Rose is a great card in my opinion. This adds to the burn deck like I was talking about. This is a 3 cost inkable, 3 strength, 3 willpower that says when you play this character, gain 1 lore. Not too shabby in my opinion. It has 1 lore on it as well. This is kind of like another goat almost because it doesn't gain the lore when it leaves. But if you could play this card, gain the lore, every lore counts in my opinion when you're playing a burn deck. And even sometimes in Ruby Amethyst, sometimes you just want a strong 3 cost character. And this is a 3/3 body, which is pretty good. And it still gives you a lore. So if you quest with this, that's already 2 lore and that's overpowered in my opinion. Amethyst also gets this really cool Genie this set that a lot of people are talking about. I've seen a lot of people play test this card. So you guys let me know how it is because I haven't tried it yet. It's a 4 cost uninkable, 2 strength, 4 willpower with evasive that says when you play this character, draw a card. And he quests for 2. So questing for 2 really is what sells me on this card. I feel like you should not underestimate characters that can quest for 2. It technically is a Diablo out because if your opponent's playing Emerald Steel, 4 willpower is something that's kind of hard for them to out sometimes. And that 2 strength can contest the Diablo, which is not bad in my opinion. And drawing a card is always pretty good, right? Because at the end of the day, it kind of replaces itself. It is evasive, which makes it really sticky. And questing for 2 with evasive characters is something that I've learned is really good ever since Minnie Mouse Surfer format. So if you have like an aggro, maybe evasive deck that you really are into, this might be a really good fit in there. We have the 1 cost Diablo. I think this card is insanely good. It's called the Obedient Raven, 0 strength, 1 willpower. When this character is banished, you may draw a card. Very simple. It's kind of like Cusco, the scared Cusco, but just an earlier turn. You can do this on turn 1. And in my opinion, I wasn't a big fan of brooms. The brooms, magic brooms are really cool, but I feel like this might just replace brooms because at the end of the day, this can just net you more and more lore. I don't know if it'll replace brooms in like the Ruby Amethyst, like mid-range kind of deck, but in the burn deck, this card is really good. You know, if you told me that we were going to get another Cusco card, I would have said you're lying. That's too good. Especially because it costs only 1. And if you're playing Emerald Amethyst, you can actually shift your Emerald Diablo onto this Diablo. So if you're questing with this card and your opponent decides, you know what, I don't want to challenge it to give you the draw, then you have a free shift target, which is pretty nice in my opinion. Calhoun the Goon is one of my favorite steel cards. Marine Sergeant, 2 cost uninkable, 3 strength, 2 willpower with resist +1. So during your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, gain 2 lore and she quests for 2. That is so strong. This is like Robin Hood that you can play on turn 2 because Robin Hood would also give you 2 lore. That's the Robin Hood champion of Sherwood. So if you having that Robin Hood ability on turn 2 is really strong. She is uninkable, so you definitely have to pick and choose like what you use in the deck that you play this in. But it's a lot of pressure, right? This feels kind of like Bonsai, and I thought Bonsai was already pretty good, and this feels even better than Bonsai because of that resist +1. So against aggro decks, Calhoun might be the way, and remember giving Sapphire Steel decks that can maybe add more resist with Cogsworth. Yeah, that sounds really scary with Calhoun. I've always liked that ability, like that Taka ability from set 1 that lets you gain lore when you challenge characters. So I like that this is a pretty strong card, and I like that it's uninkable too, because like I said, it makes you pick and choose. But be on the lookout for Calhoun the Goon in this format. More uninkables that are pretty good. Simba Protector. It's a shift 3, 4 cost, 4/4 that can quest for 2. At the end of your turn, if this character is exerted, you may ready your other characters. So in testing, this card is good. It's just my biggest issue is that it forces you to play the 1-drop Simba and the 2-drop Simba to really have some good shift targets. So realistically, you're going to probably be playing Amber Steel unless you're playing an Amber strategy and you can play both 2-cost Simbas, the Bodyguard and the 1/4. When this card does resolve though, I feel like I am winning the game no matter what. Sometimes I've opened up situations where I'll go Simba into double Daisy, and then you can shift the Simba and your Daisies are just going to be ready at the end of the turn, and that feels really unfair in Amber Steel. And I'm sure there's other ways of utilizing this card with the smaller Simba characters and other Amber color packages. As of right now, I feel like it is a shift target, but because it is uninkable, you might want to stick to some of the other inkable shift targets in Amber Steel. But this card is for sure going to make some pretty strong waves in aggro decks that really just wants to spam these characters and get to 20 as fast as possible. Gantu, Captain Crankyhead, is a 5-cost inkable, 4 strength, 3 willpower that quests for 4. Strength in numbers is overrated. I prefer my own strength, and this guy is strong. He quests for 4. That is something that should not be understated. Do not underestimate Gantu. If anything, I actually think Gantu is better than that Simba we just covered. He's a rare in the set, and honestly, this card is going to shape the meta to an extent. I think people are going to start playing Smash because of this card, because this is a 4-quest character in Steel. And I feel like Steel does a very good job at keeping control of the board. So if this Gantu stays on the board for 1 turn and you quest for 4, you're questing for 1/5 of the win condition with just 1 Gantu quest. And it's a 5-cost character, so you can utilize it with something like Dock or Lantern to bring it out even earlier. Maybe you're playing Sapphire Steel and you can use Mickey or the Azurite Seed to ramp a turn earlier, so this Gantu comes out pretty early, and then you can even give it resist with Cogsworth, and you can play Lucky Dime and Lucky Dime your Gantu. It's inkable. The fact that it's inkable makes it so playable in a variety of decks, so be on the lookout for Gantu because he is a 5-cost character that can quest for 4. In fact, he is the lowest cost character that can quest for 4 aside from Flynn Rider, his own biggest fan. The next one after that is actually Robin Hood, and that Robin Hood is a 6-cost character. So this is actually unfair. Being able to play this Gantu on turn 4, a character that can quest for 4 on turn 4, is unfair. To me, it's pretty good too. This is a 6-cost uninkable 3/6 shift 4 that can quest for 2, and when you play this character, you may deal damage to chosen character equal to the number of your pirate characters in play, and that does include himself, so you'll always deal at least 1 damage. I like this card in testing because you're always playing Force Me in most of those Steel decks anyways that are pretty mid-rangey, and now you can afford to play other pirates like Captain Hook, and it gives us some pretty awesome synergy. By turn 4, this me will end up dealing maybe 2 to 3 damage depending on what's going on, and that's potentially a free smash, and it happens when you play him no matter what. So even if you're not shifting this me, you'll still get that ability, which is pretty cool, because let's say by turn 6 you have a Smee on board, you don't want to shift it, you'll deal 2 damage. If you have more pirates, you'll deal more than that. In my opinion, pirates might make a pretty big wave this set because cards like this, cards that can gain tempo, like you can play a character and do something, possibly remove other characters across the board, are very efficient, and I think are going to be very good this format. I think we need to acknowledge Wreck-It Ralph Ham Hands. I haven't tested this card yet, but it comes up a lot in conversation. It has the ability to pop items on your side of the field or the opponent's side of the field, and whichever one you choose, you still gain the lore, which is really good. So it happens when you quest on top of that, so not only does it have a strong ability, but its ability, it's a double whammy. It's a 2-for-1. You're questing, so you're gaining the lore, but you're getting that ability to pop an item as well, and then you gain extra lore. So it's no surprise why it's a legendary. Having that 4/4 body, 4 strength, 4 willpower is very important too, because it means it will be a Medusa target, and it's kind of sticky. It's a little hard to remove because you can't just fire the cannons or smash it to get out of the way. You have to acknowledge that it is a uninkable character though, so once again, you have to pick and choose like what good cards you're going to use when you're kind of deciding with your deck. How many uninkables are you going to play, and is Wreck-It Ralph going to be one of them? Which is why I really like inkable cards like John Silver, the Stern Captain. This is kind of an overstated card in my opinion. It's a shift 5, 6 strength, 6 willpower, which is really strong in my opinion. Quest for 2, resist 2. At the start of the turn, deal 1 damage to each opposing ready character. So that's kind of cool. It's like a Tinkerbell almost, because it doesn't do it to everybody, just everybody who's readied. However, shift 5 That's pretty strong in my opinion. And if you're playing a pirate location deck, or you're already probably using that Steel John Silver, which lets you shift this on turn 5. That's only 2 turns later. Having resist +2 makes it really hard to remove from the board unless you're playing stuff like Let It Go or World's Greatest Criminal Mind. While it feels like it does have a target on its back for those cards, I still feel like you got to respect the fact that it's a flood board. It's an alien, it's a villain, it's a pirate, and a captain. He has a bunch of different stats. There's some pretty good John Silvers in the meta too, and I feel like I said, pirate locations might be a very reasonable deck. Speaking of locations, Transport Pod is a pretty good card. It's a 1-cost inkable item. At the start of your turn, you may move a character of yours to a location for free. And that's pretty good in my opinion. Usually stuff that says free, you gotta respect, you gotta acknowledge that it might be broken. And in my opinion, this has the potential to be pretty broken because you can utilize this with cards like Castle. At the beginning of your turn, if you have a character, Transport Pod, and a castle, you can move your character to the castle using Transport Pod. And then you can use Castle's ability, remove it from the bag so you gain the 2 lore, and then trigger so you can draw the card because it's now on the character. It's a pretty cool card in my opinion. I think there's a world where you use this in other location based decks, maybe Emerald Steel, maybe you like Amber locations and you want to move characters to that Sugar Rush for free like we were talking about. This is a card that might do it for you, and it's pretty good because it's only a 1-cost inkable. So even when you don't need it in the game anymore, you can just ink it away. And in the very beginning of the game, you can play it and it doesn't cost too much. I think locations are really good in Lorcana, and I think the fact that Sugar Rush has a 6 cost to move characters means that it's good, right? Like it's a very good effect, and it means that you have to pay a hefty cost. And the fact that this bypasses that for only 1 ink forever for the whole game, as long as it stays there, is wild to me. It's really good. Another interesting Emerald card is Mosquito Bite. This puts 1 damage counter on chosen character, meaning it plays around resist because you're not dealing the damage, you're just putting the counter on it already. It's kind of like using the Amethyst Bell card or Mama Odie's, for example, to move counters from your characters to the others, but this one just places a counter. So this is pretty good for Emerald because there's a lot of Emerald cards that say you can use this ability assuming your opponent has a damaged character, like draw a card for every damaged character, banish any damaged character. When you challenge a damaged character. So many abilities for Emerald damaged characters, but without having any actual cards in Emerald that dealt damage, it almost felt like, why are you giving us these cards, bro? But we finally got one, and it doesn't necessarily deal damage, it puts damage. So very fun card. Mosquito Bite, it's a 1-cost inkable, and it's an uncommon, so it might be one of those uncommons in the set that it's really popular. And last but not least, I want to go over the Emerald Daisy Duck Pirate Captain. She's a 4-cost inkable character, 3 strength, 3 willpower. Whenever one of your pirate characters quests while at a location, draw a card. She quests for 2. She's a Dreamborn Hero Pirate Captain, which is pretty nice because she got that captain synergy there, so it will synergize very well with your Mr. Smee. Also potentially with your Moana if you're playing Moana instead. But this has an ability that says draw a card, right? So it's any time a pirate quests at a location, including herself, which is pretty good in my opinion. And I've been toying around with an Emerald Steel location deck, or even just the idea of using Emerald and locations now that we have Transporter Pod. And this is going to give you that ability to use your pirates effectively, putting them at locations, questing anytime they draw, which is really cool. Sometimes you already have the locations set up, or you already have your characters at locations, and all you have to do is just play the Daisy, and once you quest with those guys, you're going to draw a card for each time you do. And if you have 2 daisies on board, yes, you draw 2 cards every time you quest with 1 character. So this card has some decent potential. It's no wonder why she's also an enchanted. But that's going to be it for this video, going over some cards that I think are going to be very respectable coming in Azurite C, which drops November 14th. We only have about a week until this set drops, so be sure to stay tuned to Lorcana Goons for more. Hit up your local game store if you want to pick up this set because it is dropping at local game stores first before the retail release at Targets and Walmarts and stuff. That's not till November 25th. And if you want to keep up with my Continental's journey, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you're a Lorcana Goon because it does support the channel, and we'll see you goons next time.